I was doing these movies that we improvised, and Taylor Mead would make up more of the political ones, like Against the War in Vietnam, and I would do more of the silly ones, like where I played Ahmet Ertegun, who was the president of Atlantic Records. I played his wife, and I had to put ice on my nipples, because I was supposed to be Mika Ertegun, and we were trying to get Mick Jagger excited so he could still be a rock star. My first big break came when I was an art student at museum school in Boston, and I had a boyfriend. And he was driving a cab to make extra money for town taxi. And into his cab one day came a guy named Ed Hood. Turns out Ed Hood had been in Chelsea Girls, like one of Andy Warhol's best films. And he held court at his house in Mount Auburn Street in Cambridge every night. Ed Hood liked the cab driver boyfriend. So he said, why don't you come over to my house? He just had different people there every night. And we'd stay there till really late, and we'd meet all the people that would eventually help me when I was a publicist or when I was an artist or when I was anything, because they were the most interesting people on earth. So like Danny Fields, who had 10 magazines and was in Atlantic Records, Donald Lyons, who was a film critic, and then these great bands like Jonathan Richman, who was in the Modern Lovers. But the most interesting one, or the one that would help me to my next phase, was Paul Morrissey. Paul Morrissey directed and really made all of Andy Warhol movies. They liked me because I was an art student and I had had a one-woman show at Harvard. I was an arty type of gal. Paul Morrissey stayed at our house that weekend. So he did say at the end of that weekend, why don't you come and say hello and meet Andy next time you're in New York? So the next school break from Boston, I went into New York. I went up to the factory and I got to meet Andy. And the very first thing he said to me is, I love your name, you know, that's Susan Blond. I love your voice, and you can hear that. And you're going to be in all our movies. Now, he probably said that to everyone, but I was determined to make this happen. After school, I got accepted to the Whitney program. 5 students in the whole country who got accepted and can paint in a special place and have a studio, and it's a prestigious thing, like Julian Schnabel happened to come out of it. But to me, it was working in a bank vault down on Reed Street painting. And New York and the press parties and everything going on in New York was just too exciting, like really exciting. In the early 70s, everything seemed possible. Everything was fun. It was way before AIDS. I would go to these parties, like one would be at the Plaza Hotel for Procol Harum, and one would be at Sign of the Dove, and they were very lavish in those days because people spent money at record companies. One of those parties, it was at the Erotic Film Festival. And I was wearing this short fur coat, and I was wearing this Skull and Bones, very, very, very short skirt, and I was really pretty wild. And Eric Emerson would deflower all of my girlfriends. He was one of the early Warhol stars that was very attractive. And so at this party, just being myself, and actually someone described me in the New Yorker that day as Susan Blond, who was famous at Max's Kansas City and elsewhere. Glenn O'Brien was watching me and seemed to get a kick out of me, and he thought everything I said was kind of funny. So he came over and said, would you like to work at Interview Magazine? He was the editor-in-chief at the time. Interview Magazine was Andy's magazine that had one celebrity interview another one. I just said, okay, and especially because it was with Andy, and I thought this would be great for my art to work with Andy Warhol. The next day I started working at Interview Magazine selling ads. I stayed at Interview and sold to the record companies, and United Artists, a guy named Marv Greifinger, offered me a job, and I didn't even have to be a secretary. So again, I was like the only woman on earth that didn't have to be a secretary, because I already knew a lot of the important writers, and that was helpful. And these were the original writers I met through Ed Hood. So at United Artists, I worked with Tina Turner and Electric Light Orchestra, Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, all the blaxploitation films. And it was an interesting time, and during that time, I was still going to exciting parties. In the early 70s, all the Park Avenue type of rich people liked to have those of us that were the artistic types around and at their parties. So we went to one of these Park Avenue parties, and I went to the ladies' room, and I got stuck in this beautiful ladies' room. And I couldn't get it out, I couldn't get it out, couldn't get it out. They had to knock down the door of this Park Avenue bathroom. And when I got out, they filmed me, and then that was the beginning of me going on Anton Parrish Presents, and then I went on that every week. So I got, my first fame kind of was actually on Anton Parrish. It was the first public access show, and it was wild because it was like kind of risque. Like I would take off some of my clothes, just my top clothes. But I still was working day job at United Artists Records. But I also got to be in Andy Warhol's movie. In fact, in a few of them. I was in Paul Morrissey's movie Madame Wang's, where I had a great role. We did 40 Deuce, and Kevin Bacon was in that, so that was nice to have a real movie star in our movie. Those were Paul Morrissey movies. Then I did Andy Warhol's movie called Bad, where I threw the baby out of the window. At that time, I got offered a job at CBS. At CBS, I worked with the greatest artists of all time, including the Jacksons into Michael Jackson for many, many, many years. And also Sade, Cyndi Lauper, Boy George, Meatloaf, and I was their head of publicity. I became the first woman vice president ever in a record company during that time. I think the only reason I was successful is that I could still see as an artist. And so I could see what the artists were going through. Stayed there 13 years and decided I had to see if I could make it on my own. And I started Susan Blond, Inc. 25 years ago. A good publicist is someone who you want to take their call. You want to keep your mind out there and reading and seeing and watching. You've got to watch good things, like if I like The Good Wife, but the kids are all watching Homeland. So last night I said, I gotta watch Homeland, and I thought it was fantastic. Like I read Vagina by Naomi Wolf, Gone Girl, I haven't read that one yet. Huckleberry Finn last week. You have to shake it up, watch different things, talk to different people, go to different events, go to museums, go to shows, go to Barclays Center, go to Broadway. Keep on doing it, move around, don't get old.